Hey everybody, it's great to see you today. Welcome to Living Power, your online Bible study where we're walking through the Bible in a year. Today is November 1st and we are studying the life of Jesus. Today he is in the Garden of Gethsemane. I have just let my cat inside and he thinks it's so great now that, Caesar, that he can be right up close in the video. So let's welcome him to the class, and I promise not to let him allow me to be too distracting. Today, Jesus is praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, and I want to share with you some interesting facts about the garden that you might not be aware of. What has happened is that Jesus is walking with the disciples past the upper room, and they've left the upper room. They're walking through the Kidron Valley, and they are going into the Garden of Gethsemane. The Garden of Gethsemane is a place where they would likely have spent lots of time before, probably camping out, as they had spent many Passovers in Jerusalem before. This is the same place where Jesus is crossing over the Kidron Valley, where David, do you remember King David? King David was betrayed in this same place by, let's see if I can pronounce his name, Ahithophel, who betrayed him when David's son Absalom was trying to take over the throne. It happened in the same place, and you can go back and read that story in 2 Samuel 15. And interestingly, Judas is going to hang himself. Does he do it today? Nope, I think it's tomorrow. Judas is going to hang himself tomorrow. And interesting in that story, Ahithophel hung himself also. That was the end of that story as well. So that was just amazing. Now, I can't see my notes because Caesar is right on them. You have to move, kitty cat. Now, there's something very, very significant about a garden. The Bible opens up with the scene in the Garden of Eden. The Bible closes in Revelation with a garden, a new garden that we'll talk about, that God is going to bring into being at the end. Today, in the middle, we see a garden. And in the middle, this garden undoes what happened in the first garden. In the Garden of Gethsemane, the first Adam committed a sin. I don't think I can teach right now. I don't know if I should tape over. You guys want me to tape over, or you want me to just leave this? Are you guys having a good time watching this, or are you thinking I should tape over? I'm not sure. Let's see if I can get him to lay down. In the first garden, Adam committed a sin that created separation, mankind from God. In this Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus is going to, who is the last Adam, is going to, through his obedience, undo and reconnect everything so that man can now find a way back to God. Paul explains that for us in 1 Corinthians 15:45. The name Garden of Gethsemane means olive press. And if you've ever seen an olive press, it is something that crushes, think about crushing the olives to get all of the oil out. If you were an olive and you were being crushed and pressed, you would probably have sweats of olive oil coming out of your skin, out of the skin of the oil of the olive. And the scripture tells us that Jesus, during this time, this agony in the garden, was feeling like he was being pressed and he was sweating drops of blood. I believe the agony was so intense at this point when he is in the garden that we can't even begin to comprehend. Not only was he taking on the sin of the world, but he was about to be separated. Think about tearing a piece of paper or a cloth that you rip and you separate and tear in half. This was what was about to happen when he died for the sins of the world and was separated in that moment from the Father in a way he had never been separated before from all time. This is why he was agonizing. It wasn't because he was afraid of being beaten or afraid of a nail in his hand, even though those are excruciating things. It was much deeper. What was about to happen was theologically much, much more significant. A contingent of Roman soldiers and temple guards were given to Judas for the purpose of coming and arresting Jesus. They're coming in the thick of night in the garden with blazing torches, weapons, and lanterns. They come before him and think that they have to be prepared for battle to arrest him. And it's important to note that he goes absolutely willingly. He willingly lays down his life for you and for me. And interestingly, he says to them, don't you think that if I didn't want to go with you, I could call on 12 legions of angels to come? A legion is about 6,000 Roman soldiers. So what he's saying is, just like that, 72,000 angels could come and protect me, and you wouldn't stand a chance. So don't think you're coming with your little bats and lanterns and clubs and thinking that you can prevent me from doing something I don't want to do. I willingly lay down my life. And Jesus says, who are you looking for? And they say, Jesus of Nazareth. And he says, I am. Now, in our translation, it says, I am he. In the original Greek translation, that word he isn't there. They've added it to make more sense in our English. But what he says is, I am. I am is the name of God. It is the name God gave for himself to the forefathers in Genesis. And I believe that when he said this, he let out a little bit of his superpowers. And the people literally fell back when he said this. They fell back. They had to pick themselves up and get up. It says nothing else about that. The people probably didn't even know what had happened. But the name I am, there's power in the name. Do you respect or profane the name of Jesus? There is power in his name to save and power to condemn. These people fall back, have to pick themselves up, and they continue in what they are doing. It's interesting to study the way Jesus prays the prayer in Gethsemane, because we can take a lot of application from how he prays and how he agonizes during this time and apply it to our own life. It, in a way, helps me understand why some of the difficulties in this life come upon us. Here's our first suggestion. Our first concern in our prayers should always be for the Father's will to be done. This was how Jesus prayed. Jesus made his request, I'd like it to be this way, but I pray first and foremost that your will be done. So we can ask for what we want, but we should always have that caveat. Now, the only way to be able to do that is to have a relationship with God that's so solid that we trust him in the midst of any circumstance, no matter how bad it looks. You have a child that is sick and may die. you have lost your job and your home is being foreclosed on and you have no resources, whatever it is your relationship with God so solid that you know He has your back? He has everything in control and is going to use it for your good. If we know that God's allowing it because we know He's sovereign and we can trust that it's okay, He is going to use it for our good. And the other thing we can think about this prayer is that we have to put away and discard our worldly thinking, the things that we've been taught to believe that suffering is to be avoided at all cost. This just isn't reality in God's kingdom, because suffering in God's kingdom is a tunnel, it's a way through to glory. Suffering for the right reasons, of course. Now, suffering because of sin is not what I'm talking about, but suffering in God's will and suffering for the right reasons is. It is the Lord's good pleasure to take something that the devil meant for bad and to turn it into a blessing, which, as we've spoken about before, is just what's happening. The devil meant for the death of Jesus to be the end, so that mankind could never go back to God, and that the devil would win and that God would not. But God in His sovereignty is able to take something bad and turn it into something good, not just good, but great beyond our wildest imaginations. You know, the more difficult a problem, the more God can show Himself and reveal His glory in that circumstance. So as Christians, let's not always try to avoid suffering, and let's not always try to push our will over God's will in a situation. But let's look at Jesus' model that He gave us as He was being pressed and crushed in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus' concern for the disciples is evident at this point in time. We know, we talked about that He went willingly, and we know that He knew what was happening. Jesus is bound at this point by these people that are coming with their lanterns. He is bound and He is taken to Annas. Now, in Jewish law in the Old Testament, we learned that the high priest is the high priest for his entire life till he dies. But what we need to understand from a historical perspective is that the Romans did not like that law, and they made the Jews practice something different. They deposed Annas in AD 15 and put his consecutive sons in that role, and at this time, his son-in-law, Caiaphas, had been put in that role as high priest by the Romans. So the Romans recognized Caiaphas, but to the Jews, Annas was still really the high priest because he hadn't died yet. They take Jesus bound to Annas, and 2 disciples are with him. We know Peter is one of them. We think the other might be John, but there is some disagreement as to who the second disciple really is. The others have scattered. We don't know where they've gone. And meanwhile, as we read today, Jesus is coming before Annas, who is questioning him, and Caiaphas is in the background waking up all the members of the Sanhedrin and the priests and is asking them to come immediately. And that's what he's doing, is organizing them, because they're going to have an improper trial. And tomorrow in the reading, we're going to discuss what are 5 things that are so improper and against the law about this trial that the Sanhedrin fix and that Jesus is actually put through. So Caiaphas is getting together the Sanhedrin, who will try Jesus before the rooster crows, and we will read about this infamous rooster tomorrow in the reading. These people did not believe in him. The question for us today is, who do you say this Jesus is. Well, we're going to quit for today, but tomorrow the drama continues. You won't want to miss it. I look forward to studying the continuation of these trials with you tomorrow. Blessings to you. Shalom.